I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. In Senate floor remarks on Monday, Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell continued his streak of blaming the Biden administration and congressional Democrats for inflation. The Kentucky Republican accused Democrats of attempting to raise taxes and called their past and current claims about inflation dubious. Hammering Democrats over the economy is a key ploy for Republicans leading into the 2022 midterm elections. Polls show Republicans with a nearly double-digit lead over Democrats on issues pertaining to the economy and inflation. As the generic congressional ballot narrows in some polls, likely caused by the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, Republicans have sought to keep the conversation on pocketbook issues like rising prices of staple goods.
Eastern Kentucky is reeling from some of the worst flooding in our state's history. The area is still experiencing rainfall today. This horrible, tragic crisis is far from over. In Jackson, waters reached 43.5 feet high, breaking an 83-year-old record. Drone footage shows whole towns completely submerged. Roadways have turned into rivers. Rising waters have reached rooftops. Across more than a dozen counties, severe rainstorms have created crisis conditions. Water rose too quickly for many to react, with tragic consequences. The governor has confirmed that so far 30 Kentuckians have lost their lives amid the flash floods, including children. And I think that number is likely to rise in the coming days. Even the families who were lucky enough to get out unscathed have lost homes, businesses, and heirlooms. In many communities, the waterlogged destruction is absolute. Eastern Kentucky is well known for its steep hilltops, rolling forests, and deep hollers. Those features, which make the region one of the most unique in the country, also create complications for emergency personnel. Our heroic first responders, including the National Guard from Kentucky and surrounding states, are working overtime to find and recover stranded residents. They've rescued more than 1,400 individuals since floodwaters hit. Nearly half of the rescues were by air. Late last week, I joined with every member of Kentucky's congressional delegation to support the governor's request to the president for a major disaster declaration to give our first responders federal help. President Biden issued that declaration promptly, and resources are already flowing into the Commonwealth to assist local emergency personnel. The president called me the other day, and Secretary Mayorkas did as well, and FEMA Director Criswell. We are deeply grateful for all three of them's speedy action. Director Criswell traveled to Kentucky last week and has been on the ground assisting with recovery efforts directly. My staff in southeastern Kentucky are in close touch with local officials in the area, providing all the help we can. I'll visit the affected communities myself in the coming days to meet with constituents and offer support. Unthinkably painful stories continue to come to us out of eastern Kentucky. However, we've also heard moving reminders of Kentuckians' selflessness. Last December, the city of Mayfield in the western part of Kentucky was devastated by tornadoes. The town lost its fire station in that storm. But despite their own challenges, last week the Mayfield Fire Department filled an ambulance with equipment and rushed to eastern Kentucky to aid relief efforts. They didn't have to think twice before helping fellow Kentuckians. We saw generosity all across the affected region. Residents with boats, jet skis, and kayaks put their own lives at risk to rescue their neighbors. Schools, churches, parks, and businesses opened their doors to displaced families. As one resident put it over the weekend, no matter what, eastern Kentuckians help each other. So I'm monitoring this situation closely and doing all I can to assist. Kentucky leaders on both sides of the political aisle are working together to coordinate further federal aid. Thankful to everyone who sprang into action to help with the rescue efforts, whether they were professional first responders or just good Samaritans. And I'm thankful for the help our state has already received from FEMA. Their continued assistance will be vital for rebuilding in the months ahead. Eastern Kentucky has been devastated by these floods. Our recovery process will take months, and in some places, literally years. But I know we'll bounce back. Kentucky's faced challenges before, and we always overcome. Now, on a completely different matter, when it comes to our economy, American families do not trust this Democratic Party government one bit. Nearly 90% of Americans are feeling anxious about inflation. 28% approve of how President Biden is handling it, just 28% approval rating. Only 22% think things will get any better after another year on his watch. Americans' distrust of Democrats stands to reason. A year and a half ago, every single Senate Democrat provided the deciding vote for a $1.9 trillion reckless spending spree that's caused the worst inflation in 40 years. The Democratic leader, Senator Schumer, said back then, "I do not think the dangers of inflation, at least in the near term, are very real." He went on to lead every single Democrat to cast a deciding vote for the party line spending spree that has destroyed families' purchasing power through inflation. Now, the very same people want to deal our economy another body blow on a party line vote. The same Democrats who said that a $1.9 trillion spending spree would not cause inflation are now saying, listen to this, it's a good idea to raise taxes, kill jobs, attack American energy, and hammer American manufacturing, all in the middle of the apparent recession which they have already created. Everyone knows that raising taxes in a recession kills jobs, but that's precisely what Democrats are desperate to do. So here's what they're proposing: a huge new tax hike on American jobs, more than $300 billion in new taxes. The Joint Committee on Taxation says a whopping 50% of that burden would fall directly on our nation's manufacturing sector. So in the middle of a supply chain crisis, Democrats want a huge job-killing tax hikes that will disproportionately crush American manufacturing and manufacturing jobs. Oh, and Democrats also want a huge new tax hike on American natural gas. Natural gas is the single largest source of electricity generation for our entire country. A plurality of all the power in America comes from, you guessed it, natural gas. It's also how countless families heat their homes. And it's the linchpin of our domestic energy independence and our ability to export to our allies in Europe. But the Green New Deal Democrats are coming straight after American natural gas with huge new tax hikes. The result will be higher electricity bills, higher heating costs, less exporting to our European allies, just as Putin is trying to cut them off, and 90,000 workers in the oil and gas industry, listen to this, out of work. eliminating 90,000 workers in the oil and gas industry in the process. Democrats' tax hikes on American energy don't stop there. With gas prices still sky high, our colleagues are also proposing to resurrect a defunct tax that would take direct aim at American oil refining. And they want it pegged to inflation. So the tax hike will automatically climb up and up exactly when the country can least afford it. So on top of all this, the Democrats also want to pour new funding into the IRS so they can more easily come after small businesses. IRS agents get new cars, new computers. Small businesses, they get more audits. Add it all up, these tax hikes and others, and Democrats want to drop an anvil on our economy at the worst possible time. The nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation has demonstrated the Democrats' plan would shatter President Biden's promise not to raise taxes on households earning less than $400,000. Households making less than half that amount, less than $200,000, would see a $16.7 billion tax hike in the year 2023 alone. This is people making under $200,000 would see a $16.7 billion tax hike next year alone. Amazingly, the very lowest earning Americans who make less than $10,000 per year would see the largest percentage tax hike of any group in the entire bill. So it hits people who make below $10,000 on a percentage basis harder than any other group in the entire bill. So Democrats are labeling all these tax hikes the Inflation Reduction Act. But nonpartisan experts have already proven that's flat out false. The budget experts at Penn Wharton show this bill would slightly increase inflation in the near term and do nothing to meaningfully reduce it in the long term. So it's not about inflation. When you raise taxes on something, Madam President, you get less of it. It's the way it works. So in the middle of a recession, Democrats want to raise taxes on American jobs. In the middle of an energy crisis, Democrats want to raise taxes on American energy. In the middle of a middle-class inflation crisis, Democrats want to raise taxes on households way, way below the president's $400,000 threshold. All of this economic genius is brought to you by the same people who called a $1.9 trillion inflation time bomb the, quote, American Rescue Plan, and promised it wouldn't cause inflation right before it did. We know what it looks like when Democrats say they'll help the economy, and American families can't take much more of it.